Thanks for two really interesting presentations. I thought I'd kick things off by asking you, Julia. You're talking about quite long-term timescales with quite a degree of uncertainty. I was wondering kind of how you make the case or the pitch to some of the smaller companies in the supply chain that might be involved.
So, provided that we get our development consent order at the end of 2021 and that government policy all aligns, then we think that actually this is among the more certain projects because we're building a known design. So we know what we need to buy. We just need the policy framework aligning so that we can get going.
Okay. And in terms of that, does that still open it up to other companies being involved in? I know obviously you're replicating things, but are there still opportunities out there for people?
Absolutely, there are lots of opportunities. When we talk about replicating, we mean we're going to replicate the design and we're going to replicate some of the key experience so that we have the same systems and so that we have enough of the transfer of knowledge. But there are really huge opportunities for existing suppliers to Hinckley and new suppliers in the UK.
Okay, I'm just coming to you, Joe. On that kind of long-term approach point, it was something that came up a couple of times in your presentation. I was wondering whether, with some of the organisations that you've been working with for a long time, whether that required a bit of a change in culture or a change in the business model that they're operating.
So I think, for us, we've got to really sort of try and drive efficiency in our asset solutions. So one of the things that is really important is to look at that sort of blend of short-term interventions that can extend an asset life and long-term interventions that can replace the asset's condition. And so where I think we're sort of finding that we need to sort of work with the supply chain a little bit more is really around the former. So it's, we've got years of history of replacing assets and building new assets. We've got far less experience of how we optimize what we already have, how we maybe change its use, how we sort of deliver improved performance from existing assets. So that's really where we need to sort of work differently with the supply chain.
And have you found that you're expanding the number of suppliers that you're working with, and you're having to think more broadly about it to respond to that challenge?
Yes, I think in particular, one of the things that we're trying to do in the water industry is look more specifically at how we can deliver what we call nature-based solutions. So how using natural systems like reed beds as an example to treat wastewater, how we can use those much more prolifically within the sort of our asset base. And so I think that's quite important to sort of think about how we sort of extend the capability of our suppliers to really sort of look at alternative solutions.
Okay. Julia, you mentioned the levelling up agenda. It's something that comes up time and again. How do you see a project like Sizewell fitting into that, and what function do you play?
So our first function is that we are able to offer an awful lot of training, so help people get onto the skills ladder. And we're also taking the approach of reskilling people so that they're able to move through the life of the project, adding to their skills. And some of these skills are things which are in really short supply in the UK, in particular welding and really high-end welding. And then in terms of the levelling up agenda, sort of beyond our skills contribution, we have a particular focus on helping people who find it harder to access work find their way into the project through local charities who work with kids who are not in employment or training. We are going to sign up to the government's Kickstart scheme so that we can help give employability experience to people. And then a huge number of the jobs are actually in the industrial heartlands where some of the greatest levelling up focus is with UK manufacturers. So we think that all in all, Sizewell can support something like 75,000 jobs in the UK, some of them directly at full time and some of them by giving UK manufacturing and other supply work. So we think we can make a really huge contribution to levelling up across lots of areas of the UK.
And it's beyond the areas that are in the vicinity of the actual project itself, isn't it? It's kind of other areas as well that you're looking to build.
Yeah, that's right. We have a very big supply chain to Hinckley from Wales. And for Sizewell, we're looking to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Welsh Government around our use of the Welsh supply chain and employees from Wales. And we're looking to do this. We've done the same thing for the north of England. We've signed a memorandum of understanding about northern contract values in the supply chain. And of course, we'll sign an MOU with the east of England, the home region of the project. So it really is a project with national reach.
And it just kind of bring us the similar topic over to you, Joe. Obviously, you're kind of focused on particular locations. I was wondering in kind of how you see improving your own asset base in terms of that levelling up agenda or kind of the skills topic.
Yeah, so obviously we have sort of investment that we need to deliver across the Northwest. But we have particular areas of focus where we see that sort of critical overlap of different aspects of what we do as a water company. So where we need to sort of drive improvements in water management, in flooding, in water resources. And so we've identified what we call strategic catchments. And so North Manchester is one of those, Blackpool and the Fylde Coast is another, and the area around Carlisle. And critically, they are also areas that have been particularly hit by COVID. They are particular focus for investment for things like the green recovery. So there's sort of overlap of needs between sort of driving improvements in the environment plus the benefits for communities that live and work in those areas is really sort of closely aligned. So it is something that we're particularly focusing on. Another aspect which is sort of moves away from our sort of construction aspects, but is just about the management of our land that we have in the Northwest. So we're really focused on how we provide better access to communities, particularly in deprived areas, to the land that we have to drive improvements in health and well-being.
Kind of preempted my next question there, which is what the impact of COVID has been in terms of your plans. Have you had to think about greater levels of flexibility? What's it changed?
So I think we've been very lucky as an organisation. We've managed to continue to deliver almost everything as we've needed to as a water company. So, obviously, like everybody else, we've all moved to work from home, and apart from our sort of key site staff, we have seen some issues in the supply chain, particularly initially back at the start of spring, but they're largely now resolved. And so all of our capital work is on track and delivering as we would expect it to be. So our sort of focus now really is how do we sort of look at some of these opportunities that come with things like the green recovery to be able to drive additional investment and opportunities for people across the region.
I suppose, Julia, for you, obviously, as a forward-looking project, what was the impact on yourself, and did it change the way that the plans that you were making in any way?
Well, I think that because we are going to copy the design of Hinckley, we're obviously very closely linked to the Hinckley project, and we've been observing the way that Hinckley's managed through the pandemic to keep the site open and to keep on track, and that's been really impressive to see. And I think that the nuclear industry, because it does have an awful lot of process associated with it, has actually been able to adapt that process to careful management of COVID. In terms of Sizewell, I think the pandemic has probably heightened the need for more local employment. I think it's caused us to look harder at bringing even more of the value of the projects back into the UK. So disrupted supply chains has made us look at where we can replace overseas suppliers with UK suppliers. So we were already aiming for 70% UK content for Sizewell, but following the pandemic, we think we will probably actually be able to push that up higher.
And Joe, you mentioned some of the technological aspects. I mean, one of the other big things that's really come to the fore recently has been the kind of climate change agenda, the announcements that have come recently. With a lot of the stuff you're talking about, it's kind of in line with the theme of retrofitting. Do you think that there's a lot of energy and kind of emphasis on the type of thing that you're trying to do?
So I think, as part of my responsibility, I look after sort of climate change adaptation and mitigation for United Utilities. So I think that it's a sort of area that's really close to my heart. And I think there are two aspects really on there. That first of all, how do we drive to achieve our carbon targets of as a net zero by 2030? And that means changes to the way we work, our fleet, the way we buy electricity, but also the way that we design our projects and how we deliver those. So it's very much part of that design capability. We're also obviously looking at how resilient those assets are for the long term. So that's part of the reason why we really want to sort of ensure that we're maximising the opportunity that we've got from our existing asset base and making that more resilient to the long term. And what we can't do is keep building our way out of climate change. We can't just keep creating bigger assets. We've got to think of different ways of managing water and the way that we use those assets going forward.
Brilliant. Joe, Julia, thank you very much.